Okay, so we're diving into this psychology audiobook
Okay.
and really want to get into the heads of teenagers.
Yeah.
How they think, how they develop, how do they become who they are?
Yeah.
And this section is all about identity formation and self-concept during adolescence.
It's a good one.
It's just intense.
It really is. It's more than just like the cliche teen angst.
Right.
You know, this is really like the foundation of adulthood that we're talking about here.
Yeah, the building blocks and this audiobook section, I think, breaks it down in a really insightful way.
Yeah.
And it kind of jumps right into the deep end with Erik Erikson, who's like a huge name in psychology. He coined the term identity crisis.
He did, which we all chuckle about, but
I kind of laugh about it, but it's like a real thing.
It's a real thing. And I think what Erikson was getting at was that all this questioning, all this exploration that teens go through, it's not just them being difficult. It's actually like essential for healthy development.
Totally.
Like up until then, their sense of self has really been shaped by family, by their childhood. And then suddenly they're hit with all these new experiences, the wider world.
Yeah.
And it's like suddenly they have choices that they didn't even know existed.
So many choices and they don't know what to do with them all.
Exactly.
I liked how the audiobook used the analogy of a puzzle.
Okay.
Which I thought was kind of a good way to visualize it. Because you have all these pieces from your childhood. Like your family beliefs and your values and experiences.
Right.
But now you're trying to make them fit into this picture of who you are.
Yes.
Not who you've always been told you are.
Right.
And that's where it gets interesting.
It does.
The audiobook brings in James Marcia.
Okay.
Who kind of took Erikson's ideas even further. And he came up with 4 identity statuses.
Yeah.
And it really emphasizes that these aren't stages that you go through in order, but rather approaches to figuring out this whole who am I puzzle.
Exactly.
So let's maybe break down these statuses a little bit.
Okay.
First up is foreclosure.
Okay.
And I'm picturing like a courtroom drama in my head.
Okay.
Which is probably not accurate.
Not quite. No, but I get where you're going.
Okay.
But think about it this way. Like, imagine a teen who decides to take over the family business.
Okay.
Right? Because it's expected of them, not because they're actually passionate about it.
Right.
That's kind of what foreclosure is.
Interesting.
It's like they're making a commitment without really exploring any other options.
They're not really exploring. They're just kind of going with...
Right. It's like a pre-selected path.
Yeah, like a pre-selected path instead of forging their own.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What about diffusion?
Diffusion.
Well, that sounds very passive.
It is very passive. It's like being adrift at sea. Yeah. There's no exploration. There's no real commitments.
But it's floating.
It's just floating along, kind of not really trying to figure things out.
The classic, I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't care, teenager.
Right.
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
Hopefully for not too long.
Hopefully not for too long.
But hopefully they move on to something a little more...
Right. A little more active.
Moratorium.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Moratorium.
Moratorium. Okay. So this is where things I feel like get a little more interesting.
This is where things get juicy.
Because moratorium is all about that active searching, the questioning.
Yes.
The experimenting.
That's like...
This is the kid who joins every single club.
Yes.
Tries out every different style.
Everyone.
They're like really trying to...
They're diving in head first.
Figure themselves out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the source actually calls this like...
It's a healthy part.
A healthy and necessary part of the process.
It is.
Which is reassuring, I think, for all the parents out there who are like freaking out.
Like, what is going on with my kids?
Like, why are you dyeing your hair blue this week?
Exactly.
Like, what is happening?
This is normal.
So it's like trying on different outfits in a dressing room.
I love that analogy.
Right.
Yes.
Not everything's going to be a perfect fit.
Right.
But you kind of got to...
You got to see what works.
See what works.
Exactly.
And ultimately, I think the goal is to reach what he calls achievement.
Exactly. That's like the summit.
Yeah.
After a long hike.
You've climbed the mountain.
You've climbed the mountain. You know who you are.
Yeah.
You feel good about the choices you made.
You're feeling good.
Exactly.
You're feeling confident. And it's not just about like external stuff, right?
Right.
Like what job do I want? Or like what do I like to do for fun? It goes deeper than that.
Oh, absolutely. This is like values, beliefs.
Yeah.
Sexual orientation, we're talking like the core of who you are.
Yeah. And all of that feeds into this idea of like self-concept and self-esteem.
Exactly.
Which again
is a whole other roller coaster during the teenage years.
During the teenage years, for sure.
But those two terms I feel like get thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
Self-concept, self-esteem. And the audiobook makes a point of saying, like, they're not the same thing.
They're not. No, it's a really important distinction, and it's easy to kind of lump them together.
Yeah.
Think of it this way, like self-concept is kind of like a collection of snapshots.
Okay.
Like it's how you see yourself in different areas of your life. So academics, social skills, talents, appearance. Right? You could say like, oh, I'm good at math. Right. I'm a loyal friend, but I'm terrible at singing. Like, that's all part of your self-concept.
So it's multifaceted.
It's multifaceted, exactly.
You can have areas where you're, like, killing it.
And areas where you're like...
Absolutely.
I don't know what I'm doing.
And that's okay.
But self-esteem, that's the...
Okay, so self-esteem is more like the overall picture. It's like...
Got it.
You know, it's that feeling you have about yourself based on all those individual snapshots.
Right.
It's that sense of worth.
So you could be like a straight A student, star athlete.
Yes.
But if you're constantly comparing yourself to others, or you're focusing on your flaws, your overall self-esteem...
It's going to take a hit.
Could still be really low.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the thing is...
Because you're just...
Especially in adolescence, they're figuring out who they are.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out where they fit in.
It's like that saying, comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh, it's so true.
Right.
Yeah.
And teenagers are constantly comparing.
Especially now.
Oh, yeah, with social media and everything.
Oh, my gosh, it's like a breeding ground.
It's a whole other...
For comparison.
Ball game.
Yes.
Okay, so then the audiobook kind of throws another term at us, which is adolescent egocentrism.
Adolescent egocentrism.
And I'm like, okay, is this just a fancy way of saying that teenagers are self-centered?
Right, like they think the world revolves around them.
Ecos.
Which, let's be honest, sometimes it feels that way.
It kind of feels like that sometimes.
Right, but it's a little more nuanced than that. Okay. It's not about them being like selfish or egotistical.
Okay.
It's really about this heightened self-awareness.
Okay.
Like this feeling that everyone is watching them.
Oh, like they're on a stage.
Yes, constantly.
Yes.
Like all eyes on me.
I remember feeling that way.
Right. Like the tiniest pimple was like a giant beacon on your face.
It's the end of the world.
The end of the world. Everybody can see it.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's that imaginary audience.
Okay. And it's because they're developing this more complex sense of self.
Okay.
Right? So, like, they're more aware of themselves as individuals, separate from their families.
Right.
And so that can lead to feeling like they're under a microscope.
Yeah, like everyone's analyzing your every move.
Exactly.
So it's not like a bad thing, then, this whole egocentrism thing.
No, not necessarily. It's like the audiobook actually presents it as, like, a necessary part of growing up.
Okay.
Because think about this, like, super self-awareness. Yeah, it can make you insecure, feel like you're always on display.
Right.
But it's also what helps teenagers start to see their own strengths.
Okay.
You know, their good qualities and the things that make them unique.
So they're like finally seeing themselves, I don't know, in high def for the first time.
Yes, exactly. Like all the details are coming out.
Yeah, all the details are there.
Yeah, and this is actually where like having supportive people around, like parents, teachers, mentors, whoever, it becomes so important because you need someone who can kind of offer guidance.
Right.
Without like dismissing their feelings.
Right, because it's so easy to get...
Because it's easy to get lost in your own head during this time.
Totally. And it's not just adults, right?
Yeah.
Like, the audiobook also talks about how crucial, like, tier relationships are.
Oh, absolutely.
During this time.
Because peer groups, they kind of become like a...
They're like your testing ground.
Yes, exactly. It's like a social laboratory where you can experiment with different identities, see where you fit in.
Right, and start to, like, build relationships based on shared interests and values.
Exactly.
Which, let's be real, can be a whole other minefield.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Peer pressure is real.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Like, even as adults, we still feel that.
Right.
But it's like... The audiobook's saying these peer interactions.
They're all part of the process.
Even the messy ones.
Even the messy ones, because you're learning social skills. You're figuring out how to deal with different situations, and ultimately, like, you're figuring out who you are in relation to other people.
Wow. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
It's a lot, right?
It's amazing how much is going on.
It's easy to forget.
In the minds of teenagers.
It really is.
And it's easy to be like, oh, you're just being a teenager.
Right.
Or it's just hormones.
It's just hormones.
But it's like there's so much more to it.
There's so much more going on.
Than that.
Right.
So what, for you, like, what's the one thing you want our listener to, like, walk away really remembering?
You know what really gets me? is how different this whole process is for each person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, there are universal experiences, those stages we talked about.
Right.
But how each person handles them, what choices they make, who and what influences them, it's like it's their own,
Yeah.
you know?
It's like everyone's working with the same set of tools.
Yes.
But what they create is completely unique.
Exactly.
And I think that's really hopeful.
I think so, too.
For teenagers who are listening who are like freaking out
It's okay.
because they're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
There's no one right way to do it.
Exactly. You'll figure it out.
It's your own path.
It's your journey.
Okay, so last question.
Okay.
If you could go back and give your teenage self one piece of advice
Oh, God.
based on all of this,
Just one.
what would it be?
I think I'd tell myself to, worry less about fitting in
Okay.
and just spend more time on the things that I really enjoyed.
Love that.
Even if they seemed kind of weird or different.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you?
What would you tell your teenage self?
I think I would tell myself to relax.
Okay.
Don't take everything so seriously.
Yes.
It'll all work out.
It really does.
It really does.
It all works out in the end.
On that note,
Right?
I think we've officially demystified the teenage experience.
At least for today.
For today, we did it.
We did it.
To our listeners, we hope this deep dive into adolescent psychology has given you some new insights.
Some things to think about.
Maybe even spark some reflection on your own journey
Absolutely.
of self-discovery.
Yes.
Until next time.